It is a story that we'll keep alive. We've already written a pretty expansive article about it in our Shipwreck Journal. That's our membership publication. If anybody's interested in that, I'll throw a commercial in here real quickly.
Please do.
Just go,
Absolutely.
just sh- uh, shipwreckmuseum.com. People can, or just Google Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum, and you'll pull us up. And if you want to become a member, you can learn more about these stories and shipwrecks. And but the Western Reserve is the one that we probably, in recent years, for me anyways, I don't. This isn't universal. This is just me speaking, but I know a few of us feel the same way. It's got to be one of the most interesting stories, and it was absolutely an important ship in its day. Kind of, you could maybe have a little bit of a tiny analogy with the Fitzgerald because they were both very fast, they were both record breaking, and they were ships that were in the headlines kind of a lot. But the last twist, the WH Gilcher, that was the sister ship, or essentially the sister ship of the Western Reserve. Again, both of them being built 1890, summer of 1890, at the Cleveland Shipbuilding Company. The Gilcher disappeared 2 months after the Western Reserve did, but there were nobody. That ship sailed away and never came back, never to be seen again. There was no Harry W. Stewart with the WH Gilcher, so it is presumably somewhere out in Lake Michigan right now.
Mm.
So some of those, people that are searching for shipwrecks down there, and I know there's a lot of them. Uh, People like Brendan Baylod, and there's just a lot of others. I think that
Wow.
people want that ship, and I really hope they do find it, because it would be interesting to see what happened to it as well at this point.
Oh, it's how can after hearing all that, how can people not just love? I mean, and then well, but people, I don't know. I'm not upset by this, but like people will speculate over and over and over about what happened to the Fitzgerald, kind of like what you saying with the Gilcher, where we have nothing to go off of aside from what the Anderson saw and Bernie Cooper and but here we got a survivor that makes it to the shore and goes through just as a harrowing account, in that water. And I love it. And like you said, it's about it's like a bittersweet. On one hand, it's amazing. We just found an incredible wreck and the history that just came for it. But then on the other hand, oh, the family was lost, the kids were lost, the crew members. Like I think that's at least me, for my opinion, I think that sometimes can be lost on people where it's like, as awesome and amazing as the shipwrecks are and the history with it, it's like there's a lot of people that lost their lives out there. And for me, every episode I put my mind and that's like what you just walked us through. Man, what if I was the wheelsman? What if I was in the engine room or the boiler room or whatever, and I'm hearing a loud crash and like, what do I do? I gotta, because I don't want to drown in this water. And it's like I put myself in that perspective to honor and try and understand what these people may have gone through. And that's part of the passion and part of the heart, behind this channel is, the wrecks are amazing, the artifacts are really, really cool, but like end of the day, it's for the people who lost loved ones, and went through a terrible, tragedy. Each and every single one. That not every shipwreck gets 29 bells rung every year. What about the Western Reserve? What about the Gilcher? What about the Superior City? What about the? Doesn't matter if it happened 100 years ago or 10 years ago. It still just matters just as much. And I feel that passion from you. Absolutely. I'm loving every single thing you're saying. I could talk to you for the next 3 days and not be bored. You know?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I think that's a really important point that you bring up, and I try to emphasize that every November the 10th. And I did that last year as well. That when we remember the Fitzgerald, we really have to think about these other ships too. Every one of them in their own way was the Edmund Fitzgerald. They all had, every one of those crew members on all these other ships we're talking about, well, I shouldn't say all of them, but many of them, if not most of them, had families at home. And in a lot of cases, that ship, like the Gilcher, it sailed away, never to be seen again, no closure, no annual memorial that I'm aware of for any of these wrecks. And there's one thing I didn't touch on with the Gilcher and the Western Reserve too, is why they sank. That was, and it's like you hit on it with the Fitzgerald. Think of all the theories, some of them kind of crazy. theories as to why
Heard
the Fitzgerald.
aliens, like, "What?" Well, like
Exactly. Some of them are just kind of out there, but yeah, the what ended up coming back with the Western Reserve, and it wasn't like because it's in like 600 feet of water, so it's not like there was any, as soon as it sank, it wasn't like they were putting some kind of submersible down to try to get sections of the steel to better understand what happened. But what it was believed by the marine architects, engineers, what have you of the day was that perhaps it was the steel. Keep in mind, it was one of, if not the first all steel ship.
brittle
Um,
steel.
right. They called it soft steel in some of the references back then, but they think that it was probably two things. The steel was the problem, but the other thing was maybe the way it was designed and built, there wasn't enough. I mean, I'm not a marine architect, but I think the idea was there wasn't enough reinforcement built into the ship itself. So they were all new designs, and maybe they were lacking a little bit. I mean, there were some accusations from people that worked in the shipyard there in Cleveland in 1890 that maybe, things not exactly so. But there was also, kind of like we see today, there was some sensationalism that was on too.
How a reoccurring theme, at least, and many people have pointed this out. How often do you think, "Oh, this is the last run of the season, this is the last," do you think a lot of times how much of an influence from the corporations where load that thing as much as you can and get her out there? How much of that do you think played a factor in these ship after ship after ship that would be lost until they really started ending that? Do you think that was a big factor too, or
In the Western Reserve, it's hard to tell. This was a bit of a fun slash work trip. You had the family on board, although there was one newspaper article that made some reference, which I don't believe, but it made a reference that the crew and the captain, Albert Myers, they were going as hard and as fast as they could because Captain Minch was on board, like they were trying to show off. I think that's speculation or something, because Minch, being a captain himself, would have been the first to know the dangers of operating a ship on the Great Lakes, particularly in that era, but also with his family on board. So I don't believe that that was the case. I mean, we don't know, but I find that very hard to believe. But um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's there. There are some similarities, like I said a few minutes ago, with it, and the Fitzgerald. I think these days you will see ships that are not pushing the envelope that same way. The Fitzgerald, I think, was certainly um, kind of a wake up call for the industry that it's nothing for us to see. It could be the fall, it could be the middle of the summer. I'm going to work and I see 4 or 5 or 6 ships out in Whitefish Bay waiting. And it doesn't even seem like it's that bad of weather, but it tells you there's something going on up on the lake. And so I do think that they're more hesitant now to just try to push their way through, because if a storm can be so dramatic that it could sink a 729-foot ship so quickly that they didn't have a chance to get a distress signal out, that tells people how the energy and power of these lakes. The Fitzgerald was enormous, a huge ship, bigger than some of the ships that are operating out there today. Think of a ship like the Western Reserve that was 300 feet long, or even some of the ships that were older and smaller and didn't have as much power. So it just kind of gives you a hint as to why so many ships were getting into trouble. Part of it goes to what you were saying, where they were just, hey, let's just go. We're not going to make money by sitting, in a cove somewhere waiting a storm out. And there was also a lot of pressure on those captains, right? The home office, the company that was paying for the cargo, insurance dictated some of that too. I think it's just different these days, luckily.
was I think the Alpina is the oldest one out there left right now, and hope and pray nothing like that ever happens again. I mean, everybody says there's always a slight chance, but like I hope that does not happen again.
Exactly. The Alpina, one of my favorite ships. I love it. You can see that thing miles away, and you know exactly what ship you're looking at. But yeah, it's a ship in the old style. It has character. We saw the Sykes go through here about a month ago,
Oh,
something like
nice.
that. Kind of cool to see. But yeah, so many of the ships these days, they're more modern. Obviously, the 1,000 footers, they're very impressive. Uh, this is just me. I just love seeing the old ones out there. I love seeing those old classic ships still operating
Like
on
an
the
old
lakes.
car classic guy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I just a couple points here. I'm these are just thoughts that form as I'm going, and then um, I want to get on the Inkerman and Cerisolis, and then I think we should start wrapping it up and just get more get the museum fired up and end it on a strong note for you guys for the museum, what you guys maybe have coming this year, and some things to look forward to, or just what's still available to come and see. So is that okay then? We can okay.
Good.
Two thoughts I had is how much of Lake Superior have you guys mapped? If you could put a percentage kind of guessing, like, oh, we've mapped 30%, we've mapped, or you guys haven't even scratched the surface yet. Is that
We've done a good part of. I don't know if I can put a percentage on it, but we've done a lot of Eastern Lake Superior. And each year go a little further west. Daryl and Dan are out there. We've gone out of Copper Harbor. Last year out of Marquette, we actually found another wreck. I'm not going to say what it is yet because we haven't released it.
Mhm.
It's another interesting story. It's not, from everything we can tell, it's not quite as dramatic as the Western Reserve. And I think that the interesting thing about this particular wreck we found is the ship itself.
Okay.
That's the really old, very what appears to be really good shape. Um, but yeah, we're going a little further west, but it just takes a lot of time. It's not a fast process. Towing that sonar is very slow, tedious. Like I said, they can be out there, and when I'm fortunate to be out there with them, 10, 11 hours at a time, you don't see anything. But it's got to be done if you're going to cover that territory. So, yeah, a good chunk of Eastern Lake Superior, but there is still, it's a huge lake, so there's still a lot more to search to be sure.
That's a perfect segue into my next point and thought that you had made earlier. Like these ships are massive, but then you go and stand on the shore of any of them and inland seas that these lakes could swallow the Fitzgerald or they could swallow a 700 footer, no problem. Like as enormous as the ship is that you see in the moment, it's like, man, what do you mean? I ain't gonna say, oh, these lakes are how big and how deep? Like you really understand or you feel the weight of the respect for, for what they do out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll use as an example. There were a couple of British guys, British fellows that came up here through the UP and were in Michigan. You might be familiar. I don't know their names, but this
Jason,
is just
Josh, those influencers, yep. You know how
exactly.
many times we were telling them check you guys up, and then thinking like, "Wait, you guys are closed right now." Like they picked a dumb time to to come up.
Well, you know what I would say about that? I mean, if they wanted to come up and visit us, I would have dug the place out. It might have taken like 2 days to dig out, but we made it work. But the interesting thing was, and I had a lot of friends saying, you really have to get these guys up to the museum. I'd never really seen what they were doing, but I did listen to one clip where one of them was talking about the Fitzgerald and how shocked he was that a 700 plus foot ship could sink in a lake. And what he did was, and he did it in kind of a funny way, and your listeners know these guys better than I do, but he was talking about how you visualize a lake, and he said, you picture ducks floating around in it and people sailing little, maybe he said something about little toy sailboats or placid smooth. I'm not really characterizing it very well, but he described lakes the way I think people who've never seen the Great
Like a
Lakes.
wall painting. You just picture a camp log cabin over a lake with a sunset and whatnot. That's about it.
Yeah, with some deer maybe drinking water in some corner of it or something. But yeah, it's these are more inland seas to be sure. You have that right when you characterize them that way. And if any of your listeners have ever, or if you have been out on the lakes when the weather turns, my wife and I kayak a lot. We have sea kayaks, and this was even on the St. Mary's River at one point. The weather changed so quickly, and this was a protected waterway. I was stunned. I mean, it really made everything, all these stories made more sense. It seemed like as soon as, because we could hear this roaring noise coming, and it was not more than 2 or 3 minutes after we started hearing this noise that it was almost like we were right in the middle of 30, 40 mile per hour winds just instantly. And I hardly even turn around. My kayak is pretty long. Mine's like a 19 footer. And I was trying to turn it around as I could to turn around so I could at least see how Jill was doing, and I really couldn't turn. And if I knew if I tried to twist myself around to look back, I might turn over. So it's not a shipwreck story, but what it is, a story of how quickly that weather can change. And you can think about the captain of a ship like the A. Parker being out of the lake, and suddenly that weather just changes at the drop of a hat, and now his ship crew are fighting for their lives out there, and it makes it all make more sense. And a lot of times, I will. Uh, I will advise people, if you really want to come and see the museum and see it at a very special time of year, come in October.
Mhm.
The colors are changing. The lake is a little more dramatic. Although August, it's amazing how rough August can be. I mean, we just talked about the Western Reserve.
Right, right.
So it's any time of year they can be dramatic. But I love the fall, September, October, but particularly October, because you really can see some pretty dramatic weather up there, and it makes it all make more sense at that point.
Well, that's something people will comment on is like I'll go into a story and it sounds like a repeat story, but like you just said, this weather changes like that. It changes and it may start nice and calm and crystal clear and whatnot, but then winds can whip up even in August, not it isn't always just November or December time. Like it can change really rapidly fast.
Very true.
All right, Bruce. I want to touch on increment and Sarasolis, and then yeah, I think we should because bring a close to it and just do some last remarks here. Is there any? Are you guys any closer now to finding the increment and what that's almost 100 years ago now that it went down.
Nin-
79 guys on that. Jeez.
Yeah. You know, none of this is about numbers, but we'll go back to when we remember the 29 men that died in the Fitzgerald. If we look at I think it was 78 crewmen on these two. So these were World War One. This is World War One we're talking about. It's 1918, November, summer of 1918. About a dozen of these French minesweepers were built. They were minesweepers built for the French Navy. That always confuses people when I'll do programs and I talk about how the wrecks. Somebody will very often ask, what shipwreck do you want to find the most? I'm pretty new to all of this. 2011 is when I kind of got into this job and started thinking more about what we do as an organization and what shipwrecks we might want to find. But I've always been interested in World War One, World War Two. World War One, in some ways, I feel like, at least compared to World War Two, kind of gets forgotten about a little bit. But if you think about two naval vessels built for the French government that were going to be sweeping the sea lanes and the areas near these ports in France clear of mines that could blow up on contact with a ship. And if you think about the 78 French men that were on these ships, they're every bit as much wartime casualties as some of these soldiers that were in the trenches, and pilots or what have you. They were away from their homeland. They probably thought this sounded like a pretty good gig. Go to North America, pick up a ship. The war is almost over. Pick up your ship, make your way back, have a cruise, right? Make your way back to France. Like I said, a dozen of these vessels were built. They were about just under 150 feet long. These were minesweepers. They had 4-inch guns, fore and aft on them. Some people thought that maybe made them a little bit top heavy. Matter of fact, there is a great book. Before I forget about it, let me interject this real quickly. It's a commercial for Fred Stonehouse. For some of your listeners, really, he is, in my opinion, he's the preeminent maritime historian of Great Lakes history. He's probably written the most books. He's written over 30, maybe close to 35 books at this point. He wrote one about these French minesweepers, and the title of it is Gone, the greatest shipwreck mystery on the Great Lakes. And it's exactly about these French minesweepers and this whole story. Yes, we've been looking for these minesweepers. They're very small vessels. They were built over in Fort William. Think of Port Arthur, Fort William, which is now Thunder Bay, Ontario. So they were built on the other end of the lake. Why? Why was the French government coming to North America to have these ships built? It had to do more with those shipyards in France were maxed out. They were they were commissioned I mean, to the point where they couldn't take on any more orders in most likelihood. So the French government first came to the United States. Our shipyards were kind of in the same way, building, because we were a little bit late in the game in World War One, so we were playing catch up ball. Our shipyards were overrun. The Canadian government, they approached them next, and what ended up happening, the Canadian uh, car and foundry, I think I've got that right. Essentially a boxcar company, rail car company in Fort William, Port Arthur, Ontario, that area. That company had been in existence for a while, but what they did was they shifted their production methods in order to now build these French minesweepers. And so they did that. This was a very professional company. They turned out a dozen of these minesweepers in the summer of 1918. The last three were going to cross at the worst time of year, possibly late November 1918. They depart Fort William, Port Arthur, and they're making their way across Lake Superior. Um, what happens? Big surprise. A storm blows in. They get separated. There's the three. Sebastopol is the one that survived. That was under the command of a lieutenant or captain. He goes by captain by the name of Leclerc. And then the Inkerman and Cyrusol were the other two. Captain Leclerc, he was kind of in charge of the flotilla, if you want to call it that, those three ships that were making their way east, headed for the Sulaks. They got separated in the area of Copper Harbor, the Keweenaw Peninsula, and he last saw them. He was having a number of mechanical problems with Sebastopol. So they kind of ducked under some cover behind the Keweenaw Peninsula to try to fix their problems that they had. But he was able to see the lights of at least, he was able to see both, but only one light was working on one of the masts of I forget which one of the two, but he saw those vessels disappear. They were kind of headed in an easterly, northeasterly direction, and that was the last time he ever saw them. And they disappeared. They've never been seen again. Most of the searching, and a lot of people would say a lot of the evidence of their loss might have been in the area of the Keweenaw Peninsula, Copper Harbor, Manitou Island, that area. But we've done a lot of research on these. We've had a lot of people do research with us and for us. Not the least of which is Fred Stonehouse, which, by the way, Fred, I think doing a program tonight at Ordock Brewing, but it's about a whole different shipwreck at a rescue, which you might be familiar with, Jacob. Did you ever see the movie The Finest Hours?
I think I've heard of it, I believe.
So this is a story of the greatest small boat rescue in Coast Guard history, but it's on the East Coast, Cape Cod, that area. Two T2 tankers break up. A 36-foot motor lifeboat goes out and rescues like 30 guys
Mhm.
off of one of these two. And it was made into a movie with Chris Pine called The Finest Hours, Disney production. We have a motor lifeboat at Whitefish Point. Part of ours, the steering wheel,
Mhm.
was actually a movie. But Fred's going to do a program tonight at our doc. Check that to be sure. I thought that was what he said he was going to be. I thought he was doing it tonight. But if anybody's interested, if you have listeners in the Marquette area, they can go. So I wish I could go myself. But yeah, Fred's one of the researchers that's helped us also with information. He's gone out with us on the Boyd a number of times, our research vessel. But we've actually found our own research has told us some things that might make us believe that at least one, if not both of these vessels, Inkerman and Cyrusol, might be actually on this end of the lake versus
Yep.
being in the Key.
Okay.
One of which is an old history of a body in a French naval uniform being found on, I'm trying to remember now, Michipicoten Island, I think. I think I have that right. But what we found most recently was in the Canadian archives, there was another reference to a body found on Davio Island, which there's a lighthouse. The lighthouse keeper found that that's off Michipicoten as well. And that tells me if and there tends to be some confusion about these things sometimes, and you don't really know, you don't know about uh, is someone, are they seeing something that are they thinking they're seeing a French naval uniform? Is it actually a French naval uniform, or is this someone from some other shipwreck that was found? But it was the spring of 1919 that the body was found in what appeared to be a French naval uniform that had buttons that would be kind of a giveaway of French Navy. And I'm actually thumbing through Fred's book right now as I'm talking. Yeah, Davio Island. Yep, just south of Michipicoten. There's like a little chain of islands around Michipicoten, and I believe that all those bodies, maybe it was three, ultimately that were found in that Michipicoten Davio Island area. But that was, to me, that it wasn't a smoking gun by any means. But what it was the first tangible clue of a body being identified by a Canadian lighthouse keeper in what was a French naval uniform, which makes you believe that one of those, if not both of them, probably disappeared, probably went down somewhere near that. And that makes me think so what we have done is we've worked with the Canadian government to get the various permissions, um, get the right documents filled out that would allow us to go search in those areas. Have we found anything yet? No. And if any of you watched that Josh Gates program, uh, Destination Unknown, I think I have that right. The idea was searching for those minesweepers, but there was another wreck that ended up being talked about in that. But sure, it's certainly a story that's drawn attention, but yet it's such a little known story. But if you look at it, if we just want to look at it about the loss of life, it's like 80 people we're talking about here. And it's just such a little known story. And one other little thing I'd add to it, think about those people that are the the wives of these French sailors that are in France, in 1918, or think about their descendants now. They probably have a very vague idea of what happened to their ancestor in North America. If we are fortunate enough to actually find one of these wrecks, if not both of them, this is an international story at this point. And commemorations of the ending of World War One not that long ago. Um, it's just, to me, it's an amazing story. It is a story that deserves wider recognition, I think, and it's one that just surprises people. If I'm doing a program and I get onto this subject, people just are amazed by it.
Suppose, because it's only a matter of time until you guys do eventually find one, if both of them. So suppose you find it, and you're able to go down and see it. Another question came to my mind is, okay, you found it, and with the amount of crew members that were lost with it, and a lot of times knowing Lake Superior and what happens to bodies, how would you even approach that scenario if, say, there are bodies that are in the Adipocere? Say there's bodies just everywhere. Just for argument, how would you say we find them or both or whatever? They're there. We know where they're at. This is like you're saying. This is an international find. This is going to get a lot of attention when you guys do release it. But then on the other hand, is what are we allowed to show? What can we not show? Are we even forever going to be able to dive it anymore? Is this going to be a Fitzgerald situation where, nope, you can't go down there anymore because there's bodies everywhere, and then we don't want filming and photographs and whatnot? Like, so how would you approach that for you guys, I guess, personally, if and when these were to be found?
Well, we would have to work with the French government on this. These are French sailors, they're French ships. Think of the Griffin. Think of some of the controversies, I guess, surrounding that, because that's a French vessel as well. It goes to the fascinating history of North America in general. If you think of the French being here for so long, New France at one time. Think of the voyageurs. Think of the Jesuits coming through, and so there's a heavy French history. Especially in these areas, but we've already actually. My predecessor did the same thing. Tom Farquist did the same thing. We reached out to the French Ministry of Underwater Archaeology. I'm thinking that's exact. I think that's the title of that ministry. But we let them know that we were in fact searching for these vessels. We never heard back from them. We did have a connection, a gentleman by the name of P.H. Nargelet. I don't know if that name rings a bell. Um, he was on the submersible that went down on Titanic that ended up imploding.
Okay.
That was really, we didn't know until after the fact that he had gone down to the Titanic a lot. That was really kind of shocking for us to know that he was on board that. But he had kind of helped us and kind of helped grease the skids a little bit with connecting with that Ministry of Underwater Archaeology, but just to make them aware. But there would be no question that we would want to work with the French ministry. Again, French sailors, French vessels, it only makes sense. And then, of course, the state of Michigan we'd be working with. Well, depends on where we're located. If it's in Canadian waters, then that's another story altogether. So yeah, I mean, I think we would of course be needing to document to tell us one way or the other what we were looking at. But eventually we would, if it ended up being the French minesweepers, then those other entities we would have to work with, no question.
Yeah, because then, I mean, that just gets messier. I mean, because then you got all these different factors, and like, because on one hand, beyond exciting. You're finding some very rich history, but then, oh, well, how many other people are going to have their hands in the pot saying, well, you can only do this. No, you can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. And then, that just sounds like a nightmare for you guys on your end. Like, to find something like this, we want to share it, but what happens, and that was always a thought for me, at least in the terms of like human remains, is because many times when these wrecks go down, if all the crew or at least most of it goes down with them, it is what it is, unfortunately, that they are there, and I just figure that's got to be complicated right at that point to really navigate. How do we approach this? I'm sure.
Well, there's a few of us, I will say this, in the organization that are already volunteering to go to France to to meet with that ministry, meet with the media over there, and just talk about this because again, these are victims of World War I we're talking about, and it is they are grave sites, no question. Um, so we'll see what happens. I mean, I hope of all the wrecks I want to find, I mean, I know for a lot of our team, the Western Reserve was the one they wanted to find. One of our board members, C.F. Curtis, that was a shipwreck he wanted to find. Of course, with the C.F. Curtis, there's two other ships to sell to the Marvin and the Annie M. Peterson. We found the Marvin. Fortunately, we haven't found the Peterson yet. So we found a lot of the wrecks that a lot of us want to find, but we haven't found those yet.
Yeah. Just exciting. I love it. And this gets me excited. Bruce, thank you. You've been so gracious with your time sharing this. I mean, unless I talk to people like you, I'm not going to get access to, this kind of information that I'm loving. And I hope this video and this interview, it might be 2 parts or 3 parts. I'll space it out, but well, sweet on that. Um, is there what for the museum coming up here? What is there anything you want to highlight for this next year coming up, or what is still available? What would you like to say for our ending remarks and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing I would say is we open on May 1st. There was that A. Parker exhibit I talked about that I know a lot of people haven't seen yet. We are rebuilding a historic structure on site at Whitefish Point, an 18, well, early 1900s, I should say, second assistant keeper's quarters. So it's more of a lighthouse service building that used to be at Whitefish Point. We're going to be reconstructing that. There's just a number of things that we have going on. Some of them a little more in your face than others, I guess I would say, but certainly people can come back. May 1st we open. We close on October the 31st. We're open every day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. If people want to learn more, certainly become a member. But go to our website, shipwreckmuseum.com, and you can see any have, we'll go on to that. But I would say certainly come out and visit us. And like I said earlier, if you come in the fall, it's really a special time of year to visit. But May is pretty quiet too. We may have a couple feet of snow on the ground this year, the way things are heading. But either way, yeah, certainly come up and visit us. And I always want to remind people we are just a little 501c3 nonprofit. We're not state, we're not federal or anything like that. So that visitation, when people come up and visit the museum and you buy tickets to do that, what you're doing is you're helping to preserve that history, and you're helping us to underwrite these offshore operations that we have where we're searching for these shipwrecks, and the new artwork, the documentaries, the exhibits, the journal articles, the educational outreach. You're helping with all that too. So I thank everybody who's come up to visit us in the past, you as well, Jacob. And if you haven't visited, come on up this summer and see us.
Well, awesome, guys. I couldn't highly recommend enough to if you have the means to head up there and check out everything Bruce is talking about. And I've seen many times. We're going to be going many more times this year ourselves, but please do check it out, support them, because one thing Rick pointed out, these museums, a lot of people just they don't get visited. The Irwin, the Meteor, the Schoonmaker, you guys, you need that that visitation. And that's why I'm doing this interview with you. I hope this helps get that out there for you guys. So
Thank you for that, Jacob. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate again the invitation to come and talk to you about all these exciting things.
thank you so much, Bruce. It has been a pleasure.